Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternities, ranking all the movies that I saw in 2024. In this video, I'm going to rank the 15 movies that I saw this year in order from my least favorite to my favorite. All these movies, just to be clear, came out in the year 2024, so it's not just movies I happened to watch this year, it's the movies that 2024 movies that I watch. I've only seen 15 of them, which is actually not too bad. It's more than I thought I was going to see. And yeah, so I'm not really calling it a top 10 because that implies it's the top best of all of them, but I've only seen 15. So I'm just ranking the 15 that I saw from my least favorite to my favorite that came out this year. And it was a little better year for movies than I thought it might be starting the year. I think it was a bit of a slow year, although most of these, I would say half of them I just watched in the past week, and some of them did come out earlier this year, but I didn't see them until just now. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started. There's 15 of them, so we'll start with number 15, which is my least favorite of the movies, and that is a Joker Folie et Dune. Now, I was warned by a lot of people that this movie was not very good, and it was terrible. I knew that bombed, I knew the critics hated it, people I knew hated it. It seemed like everyone thought it was no good. I did watch this review on Screen Crush, and there was a panel, and a couple people on that panel actually really liked the movie and was against the hoopla with it. So what I heard about it, and I think I did hear spoilers, like I'm not going to give spoilers here, but I did know what happened at the end, like I did hear that spoiler. I think it actually helped me prepare for it. I didn't mind it as much because I knew it was coming. But anyway, because I was really, looking forward to seeing this movie before all the review bombs, or the bombs, review that it was a bomb came in. And so, but two of the people on Screen Crush who really liked it were saying, we're talking about how it's kind of subverted expectations because it's kind of a reaction to people praising Joker from the first movie as being a hero and idolizing him, which is not what they were trying to say with this character, and so they were kind of making it very clear that he's not someone to be idolized. But, so I thought that sounded good to me. Like, oh yeah, I thought maybe I might like this movie better than most people too, because maybe I might agree with those people for Screen Crush. Either way, I wanted to check it out, see for myself. And, everyone who was saying this movie sucked was correct. I should have listened to them. But it's kind of like, ever have this thing where someone, is eating something like yogurt or whatever, and ooh, this is disgusting, this is so gross. And then other people are like, oh, let me have a taste. Oh, yeah, this is gross. It's like, you want to experience it for yourself. You just don't want to take other people's word for it. You want to know just how bad it is. And I feel like that's how it was with this movie. I also kind of wanted to see Megapolis, but I never got around to seeing that because I didn't really want to pay money to see a movie that I know I'm not going to like. So, Joker was on Max, which I was paying for to watch Dune, so I didn't have to pay for it because I already had Max. But Megapolis is currently still on demand. I'd have to pay like $8 for it. But I'm curious. Eventually, when it comes out on the streaming, I am going to see Megapolis and see just how terrible that movie is, too. But anyway, Joker Folie et Dune was just boring. It was just boring. Like, I didn't really mind the message of what they were saying with the Joker. Like, I didn't think it undermined the first movie like a lot of people did. I just think it was boring. I just thought, nothing really happened in it, and like all of the exciting action, like killing people stuff that you saw in the trailer, those are all like just fantasy musical numbers. And by the way, there's tons of musical numbers that were totally unnecessary, and it was just like, it was just boring. And I thought the ending was, without giving away, pretentious and stupid. So, although I will say, it was kind of timely watching it now after the whole thing with the, Luigi, what's his face, who murdered the Halcyon, and a lot of people online are idolizing a murderer, which they shouldn't do. I mean, it's a serious issue, just like in the Joker. Joker highlights a serious social problem, but idolizing a murder is not the not the correct way to solve this problem. And so I thought the commentary was actually very poignant, even more so than the creators of the movie thought it would be. It's just the movie just sucked. It was just boring. Anyway, alright, so we'll get to my number 14. I do like it considerably better than Joker, but it's still not that fond of it, and that is Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. I was a huge fan of the Planet of the Apes trilogy reboot. We're told it was just a trilogy. It was just going to be 3. It was the one with, what's his face, Franco, and then on the head, what was it? Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. No, this is Kingdom. What was the other one? War. And I love those 3 movies, especially War of the Planet of the Apes. I remember that being an amazing movie and blown away, and I was so surprised of how good that trilogy would be, because I was never a fan of the Planet of the Apes. I always thought it was a silly franchise. But those 3 movies were actually really good. So when they announced they were coming out with a 4th one, when they said they wouldn't, I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. It's probably going to be just as good as the other one. No, it sucked. Well, not entirely sucked. It was just nowhere near as good. It's kind of the just sci-fi fluff that I was expecting the first 3 or the newer 3 movies to be, and weren't. I was surprised. Oh, they're actually good. This is more along the lines of what I was expecting, and it didn't really have a true ending because it was setting up for sequels, and it just had that sort of franchise buzz, kind of modern bullshit that like all these franchises do, where they don't have like a self-contained story and they have to set up future shit, which I just fucking hate. It's terrible storytelling. So that aspect of it really pissed me off. And it's funny because it got fairly good reviews, but I thought I was like really disappointed in it. Anyway, and then we'll get to my number 13, which is The Substance. This is a movie I just watched yesterday, and because I heard it was really good. It looked like an interesting premise. It had, if you hadn't heard of it, it was about Demi Moore being this aging, like, superstar who's, like, getting too old and so isn't popular and losing her job and stuff, so she takes this drug, this, like, underground illicit drug that essentially allows her to, or creates like a younger version of herself, and so she's able to look hot and sexy, and so it's supposed to be like a commentary on how people idolize appearance, particularly in Hollywood, but overall how youth and good looks are sort of, stuff that people idolize or whatever. And it looked interesting. Like, I thought it might be interesting, but I was told it was a body horror. And I don't think I took that warning seriously enough. I was like, oh yeah, it might be a little bit of one because she's taking this drug and makes her younger or whatever, blah, blah, blah. No. It is full-on body horror by the end of the movie. In fact, the end is just so over-the-top ridiculous. It is like, at the end, I was actually kind of, I'm not laughing, but I was kind of scoffing at it. I'm like, this is so stupid. Where I'm sure like other people are raving about it. Oh, it's so poignant. It's got great commentary, blah, blah. I was just like, this is just dumb. Now, I will say, I won't say that this was a terrible movie. I will say this movie was not for me. and I should have known when someone warned me it was a body horror. I don't like body horror. I don't really like horror like that. And, they try to say that the message of the film was about, coveting good looks and the shallowness of modern society that all covers youth and good looks. But what I think the real message is that you should always follow the direction on your drugs correctly, and there are consequences for you not doing so. Because the thing is that the characters in this movie would have lived happily ever after if they just followed the fucking directions correctly. They started trying to say, oh, the pursuit of youth will lead your downfall and it will destroy you and it's society's... I was like, well, actually, if you just follow fucking directions the way they were very specific. I mean, granted, they could have been a bit more clear about the consequences of not following directions, but hey, that's what you get from answering this random phone in this dark alley in the middle of nowhere. Anyway, maybe that was the message. We'll get to my number 12, which is A Quiet Place Day 1. I'm a huge fan of The Quiet Place, one of my favorite movies of all time. I like The Quiet Place Part 2, probably better than most people did. Not as good as the first one, though, but still a strong movie. I thought it was almost as good. Had this silly thing that happened at the end kind of pissed me off, but other than that, it was a really good movie. So I thought I was going to like A Quiet Place Day 1 because it's a prequel and they're able to have much bigger budgets. They're able to do this, all these monsters climbing down the city, and I was really looking forward to this one. And it was kind of pretentious art piece, and not in a good way at all. The first one was, I would say, artistic, and it was a great character story, which is why I loved it. Where this one was just pretentious. I could feel it's one of those movies that I feel like I can feel the director being like, look at how artsy I am. Ooh, I'm so artsy. Oh, look at this. This is so artsy. But essentially, and this isn't a spoiler to say this because this is revealed in literally the first scene of the entire movie, is that the main character is dying of terminal cancer. And to me, that was a weird choice, because if you're going to have a main character who's fighting for the survival and running away from these monsters that are killing everyone, but at the same time that person knows they're going to die in a month anyway, it kind of makes the whole investment in this movie deflated. It's kind of not interesting. They do introduce another character more than halfway through the movie and don't introduce him properly and barely know him. He is supposed to be the one who lives on that we're invested in, but we don't give a shit about him because he's not introduced until literally halfway through the movie. And you don't really know anything about him except he's from England. So I had no investment in this. All I saw was a bunch of pretentious... the action scenes were great. The special effects were amazing, which is why it's not further down the list, because I love that. The spectacle is good, but the story is kind of shit. Really, honestly. Anyway, so I'll get to my number 11, which is Challengers. I heard that this was labeled as an LGBT movie, and so I thought from the trailers made it look like it was about a threesome with these two guys and a girl who were tennis players, and I was like, oh, maybe a little interesting. It's false advertising. There were some videos trying to warn me. I didn't see it until after I saw the movie. I wouldn't actually call it an LGBT movie. It's there was one scene where they were kind of making out, the three of them, and they had the two guys kissing, but that's it. The two guys were not lovers. They made it. The movie kind of made it very clear that their relationship was platonic, and that was the only scene. So, and not that it has to be LGBT to be a good movie, but that was kind of just false advertising. Now, judging the movie on its own merits, I did enjoy it. The acting was really great. What's her face? Zendaya. mainly saw the movie for her because she's an amazing actress, and I thought her performance was so good in this movie. And the music was done by Trent Reznor, and he's love his soundtrack so much. His music is so good. So that was definitely a huge highlight of the movie for me, was the music. And the characters themselves were all toxic. They're all in toxic relationships, either toxic friendship or toxic romantic relationship. All the relationships were toxic. Now, I've heard other people say, like, oh, that's fine if it's a movie. Like, I wouldn't want to know these people in real life, but I'm watching fictional characters on the screen, so I don't really care if they're toxic as long as it's interesting. And I get that, and I agree. But I didn't think it was interesting. I thought, again, the ending kind of confused me. It wasn't really satisfying. And to me, like, they needed to have an ending that justified why am I watching these people who are in such a toxic relationship. And I don't think it did. So I was kind of... And again, the message felt... I'm sure some people think it's artsy and, ooh, it's so artistic. It's got something to say. I didn't really find that it really had much to say, to be honest. But as I said, good music, good acting, and it kept me interested for most of it. So yeah, fairly good. So next we'll get into my number 10, which is My Old Ass. And I mainly watched this movie because of Aubrey Plaza. Starting to really like her as well. And if you hadn't heard of this movie, it's about this 18-year-old who's lives on a farm, and she's about to move to the big city to go to college, and she goes on a little camping trip with her friends, and they do shrooms. And during this trip, she sees the older version, 39-year-old version of herself, come to her and sort of give her advice. And it was played by Aubrey Plaza. And of course, she thought it was just a shrooms-filled hallucination, except she has her number on her phone, and she keeps calling her and keeps talking to the older version of herself. So I thought that sounded like a really interesting concept, and I wanted to watch it, and I did find it to be an interesting concept. The problem is, about halfway through the movie, they don't really focus on that concept. They kind of drop it and focus on like this romance. And the thing is that the romance plot, not that I'm not opposed to romance plots, but the particular romance plot that they focused on in this film was felt like a Lifetime movie. Like, it felt really sappy and cheesy and like typical romantic comedy fodder. And granted, the ending was kind of good, and it tied it back to the main storyline with Aubrey Plaza in a good way. So, which is why it's a bit higher on my list. But that love romance just didn't work for me at all. And it got kind of boring, too, after they kind of abandoned that original premise. But anyway, we'll get to my number 9, which is Civil War. I don't want your Civil War. Anyway, Civil War. I keep thinking that Guns N' Roses song. So, it's, if you don't know, about a fictional modern-day American Civil War. And it sounds like it takes place like 20, 30 years in the future, but their technology seems to have backslided to like 2010. Like, I don't really get that part of it. But anyway, because it's 30 years in the future, seems like technology should have advanced and not backslided. But whatever. But the movie is it's not really about like the Civil War. People are like expected to get into the politics of liberals versus conservatives, and it literally avoids that like the plague. It's like, I'm not touching that with a 5-foot pole. Instead, we'll say Texas and California form their own nation and they go fight the United States. So they're literally trying to say, no, we're not making any political commentary whatsoever. But the thing is, I knew that coming in, so I was fine with it. It didn't upset me because I knew that would be the deal. But what the movie is actually about is reporters going, war reporters, and particularly photographers, going in, traveling from New York City to DC, which is a perilous travel in this civil war because, there's chaos everywhere, and they encounter all these dangers on the way, and they go into the middle of a war zone. And I did kind of wonder when I was watching this movie, is like, why did they make up a fictional setting? Why didn't they actually set this in a real life, modern day example in another country and have these war reporters go report on an actual war? Maybe they just didn't want to, maybe they didn't want to touch on the real life subjects and wanted to keep it fictional. Yeah, I did kind of wonder that. And plus, the way that these photographers behave, like getting right in the middle of battle, I do kind of wonder, like, that's not really what reporters do, is it? Like, they're like literally going or like right into a live, like with the soldiers and who are attacking other soldiers and being shot at. But I don't know, maybe. But yeah, so maybe that's why they did, to make it a little bit more fictional. But I did like it. I enjoyed it. I thought it had really good acting, really strong characters. I was invested. Like, it had that great scene with Jesse Plemons, who we saw in the trailer, who's only in one scene, but it was an amazing scene. It was such a good scene. But the ending kind of felt apathetic to me. It was one of those endings that, again, not spoiling anything, but it's one of those endings that was just like, kind of makes me wonder what the whole point of the movie was. Like, why did I waste my time with it? It was kind of a letdown, to be honest. But still a strong movie up until that point, so that's why I put it at number 9. So then I'll get to my number 8, which is Omni Loop. This is an indie movie with the actress who was in Weeds, the star of Weeds. And it's about a time loop, so that's why I saw it. Most people hadn't heard of this one. But it didn't feel like a typical time loop movie. Like, it was very different. It was about this woman who is dying, and she has these pills that let her travel 5 days in the past, but it won't let her go any further than 5 days. So it's not like she can go 5 days and go another 5 days. That's not how it works. She's kind of stuck to reliving those same 5 days, the last 5 days of her life, over and over again. She's trying to find out a way to make the pills go further back so she can actually relive her whole life. And so the whole movie is about that. And it's an interesting concept. It's got some really interesting character stories, but it's very absurdist as well. It's because what she's dying from a black hole in her chest, and I am pretty sure that's not a thing. And they also had this character, it seems to come out of nowhere and is not really necessary to the movie, but they had this character that's like Ant-Man. He's like microscopic, and he's like stuck shrinking, and eventually he'll shrink and become, they don't know what's going to happen, and he like lives in a subatomic plane or wherever. It's very random. It's not even important to the movie. They just randomly throw this in there, and I was like, what the hell is, so it's a bit absurdist, so you have to take it with that kind of grain of salt. And this kind of has that, indie comedy feel, the absurdist, the way that people just, talk all, awkward and funny or whatever. But, as I said, I love the way they used the concept. I love the beginning of the movie. It really hooked me. I love the ending. I thought the ending had me in tears. I thought the ending was super powerful. The middle, however, was a problem. That's when it was just really boring. It's like, and I don't see a point to it. It seemed like they dragged it out way too long. I literally fell asleep for like 5 minutes during the middle because it was so boring. And they could have done so much more. They could have done a much better job with that middle. But the beginning and ending were strong, so it makes it up to number 8 for me. So then I will get to my number 7, a movie I just finished watching like an hour ago. Love Lies Bleeding, which is an LGBT movie. It's with Kristen Stewart and Ed Harris is in it too. And this is kind of an absurdist movie as well. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me a lot of these 90s movies I used to watch in like the mid to the late 90s that were not like mainstream movies, or mainly watched them on cable or I rented it from Blockbuster or whatever, the movies that most people never heard of, that were like kind of trying to be like Pulp Fiction but not really. It didn't have the same feel. It had the general feel of, oh, let's have a bunch of violence and random shit happen, people killing each other and crazy shit. And it had like kind of this absurdist, like things would get weird and absurd at the end and it would just be violent like crazy. That's what this movie was like. It was a callback to that, which is funny that it takes place in the 80s because it felt more like a 90s movie, but it's set in the 80s. And again, similar to Challengers, you got toxic relationship. The characters are very toxic, and things are, these are not good people, and they're not going to have a happy ending. I mean, not to give away the ending. I'm not giving away the ending, to be clear. I'm not giving away the ending because that's subjective. But these are not healthy people. I was more invested though than Challengers because the story I thought was definitely more interesting. There was definitely a lot more spectacle. There's something that happens at the end that is very absurdist, and I could see people having a huge problem with it. I didn't. I did take it as a metaphor, and it made sense to me, and so I was fine with it. It was sort of an interesting. The characters were interesting. Ed Harris was good in it. It is kind of, it had that sort of apathetic 90s style kill people movie feel to it. I'm trying to think of any examples. I think there's this movie called Truth with Consequences. There was another one that was LGBT. What was it called? Doom Generation. That was extremely apathetic. And I don't know, tons of other ones that just popped up on HBO at night or whatever. But anyway, we'll move over to number 6, which is Inside Out 2, getting into a totally different tone. It's funny because if you look at the actual plot of the movie, of the character, the real life character, not the emotions inside her head, but the actual character, it's kind of boring and kind of mundane, but the story with the emotions inside her head are so complex. And I think just like the first film, which I loved, it really explores like one's inner workings, and I feel like watching the movie kind of felt like therapy a bit. It's like understanding your own emotions and everything. And so that aspect, and it did get a bit silly, it is a Pixar cartoon, but it's a good one. So I know most Pixar sequels don't really live up to the first one. This one did. Not as good, but still strong quality Pixar film. Really enjoyed it. Brought me to tears at the end, just like the first one did. And it was a good watch. So next we'll get into my number 5, which is Deadpool and Wolverine. This was a fun movie that had good jokes, good chemistry. Just the way that Deadpool just fires off jokes, it worked. I liked this better than the first one, but I don't think I liked it better than the second one. They're kind of on par, but I think I liked the second one ever so slightly better. I was disappointed in this one a little bit, which is why it's not my number 1. I don't think this is a greater than sliced bread type of movie, because I was a little disappointed that I thought it would focus more on the MCU, but instead it was a love letter to the Fox Marvel movies, which I'm sorry, but I could give two shits about the Fox Marvel. I didn't give a shit about all those cameos, by the way. All the cameos. Oh, look, it's that person's that. I was like, I don't give a shit. I don't care. I want to see the fucking MCU characters. Honestly, I don't know what that makes me, but I just never liked those Fox movies. Never did. But it's still a good movie. The chemistry between Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman was really good. And the heart of the movie. So, yeah. A lot of fun. Over the top, maybe a bit too crazy towards the end, but still. Lots of fun. So next we get to my number 4, which is Dune 2. So I wasn't the biggest fan of Dune. I did read the books years ago and saw the 80s movie and the Sci-Fi Channel movie miniseries. But I don't know. I never really cared much for it. Because it felt like, it's supposed to be set thousands of years in the future, and yet it's humanity's going to revert to where it was thousands of years ago, or at least hundreds of years ago, with emperors and dukes and kings and different houses controlling everything. I'm like, I don't know. That never sat good with me. But I do still enjoy Dune. Now, the first movie to me was basically a prologue. It's basically the first half. It's just the thing that happens. And then Dune 2 was the actual story. And it was good. And again, Zendaya, I mentioned her before. Amazing. Probably the best thing about it. It really holds this movie up. Very cinematic. The cinematography, special effects were just mind blowing, and the story was good too. I think it had a really good, solid character story. You're very invested in it. Very good acting. The one thing that did bother me about the movie though was the ending again, because it did not have as definitive an ending as the books did, or the other movies, because they know that they're going to do a Dune 3 with the next book, and so they purposely set that up, and that annoyed me. They're leaving too much. They're leaving too much for another movie. It's no, you have to have it be more self-contained than that. But wasn't too bad. It didn't totally ruin the movie. I just wish they hadn't done that. But it was still a really, really good movie. Anyway, next we'll get to my number 3, which is Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim. Really enjoyed this movie. I don't think it was the best thing ever, but if you go in expecting a movie about a war that happens with the Rohirrim, and them being held up at Helm's Deep and there being a siege, then you're not going to be disappointed, because it's pretty much exactly what you get, and that's exactly what I was expecting. I mean, yes, they do have a couple of callbacks to Lord of the Rings, but come on. You know they're going to. And they're not that bad. Actually, they're not as bad as the ones in The Hobbit, if I dare say. And so, yeah, so I was fine with them. You knew it was coming, and in the end, it wasn't actually that egregious. Didn't detract from the story at all. It's fine. It was a great, all these Tolkien purists are talking about how it's defiling purity because they're introducing a character who didn't exist in the lore. I could not possibly give two shits about that. I mean, if you could, you might not enjoy it, but I can't. I couldn't. I could not give two shits about that. They can make up entirely new characters and completely change lore for all fucks that I give. But even so, what they do in this movie could indeed and in fact slot perfectly into lore, because they come up with in-universe excuses of why no one knew about this stuff happening. So I don't know. I just think those people complaining about those sorts of things are ridiculous. But that is just my humble opinion. As I said, I don't think this is the best movie ever. It was, just a simple, revenge or storyline thing about a war. I don't want to get more specific because I don't want to give away spoilers, but it's very, by the numbers kind of war thing, but it was some good character moments within that. The animation wasn't the best, particularly with movement involved, but I knew that going in, so I didn't let it bother me. It was still a solid story, good watch, good movie. Anyway, we'll get to my number 2 favorite movie of the year, and that is Alien Romulus. Now, I believe I complained about this movie before because it's false advertising. There are no Romulans in it. I have to throw that joke in. It's obligatory. It's like, it is not optional. I have to do that joke. But, I talked about it before that this was my favorite Alien movie that came out since 1986 Aliens. But you gotta understand that's not a high bar, because pretty much all the movies either sucked or were bland and mediocre. Like, it's being total crap to kind of not that good. That's the range of Alien movies since the second one. So, this one manages to be more than that. It actually manages to be pretty damn good. I was actually surprised. I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it was, because the character stories were way stronger than I thought they would be. And if you know me, that's what I need. I need great character stories. If you have just a bunch of random people running away from scary aliens going, I'm bursting out of chest, that's kind of boring to me. I had to be invested in it. I had to care about these characters, and the movie did a very good job of getting me to care about these characters. Now, they did have, again, callbacks to the first Alien film, and I know some people were really bothered by it. I was not. I couldn't give a shit. I was fine. Like, I didn't need it, but it didn't bother me. It didn't this ruins the whole movie. No, I don't care. I mean, some of the line callbacks were a bit too obvious. Like, some of the famous lines from Aliens, like, it felt out of place. Like, it was definitely just throwing it, let's throw it in there. That was a bit annoying, but it doesn't ruin the movie, because, as I said, I was really invested in the characters. My biggest problem with the movie was actually the ending, which, again, no spoilers, but it was way too over the top and silly and ridiculous, and it reminded me of the movie Alien Resurrection, which sucked, so it's not a good thing to remind me of that movie. So I did have to kind of downgrade it. It wasn't going to be my number 1 because of that ending. So I don't think it's one of the best movies ever. But still solid, still really good. As I said, much better than I expected to be, and it was scary as hell, because you're only going to scare me if you get me invested in the characters, and it got me invested in the characters, therefore you can effectively scare me. So, we will now get into my number 1 favorite movie of the year, and that is Furiosa, a Mad Max tale. Did they call them Mad Max tale? I think that's the subtitle. But Furiosa. And just to be clear, I probably give this, when I rated this movie, I gave it a 9 out of 10. And so there's no movies this year. And Alien Romulus, I would think it would be kind of a 9, like on the edge of a 9 and an 8, but probably just barely making it to a 9. And War the Rohirrim would be an 8. So all the movies I listed before that would be like 8 or below. So there's no movie that came out this year I thought was amazing and 10 out of 10, best thing ever, and one of my classics. So nothing like that happened. The best this year gave me was Furiosa, which might perhaps make a top 100 favorite movies of all time, but not a top 50. It was, the funny thing with Furiosa, and I did a whole review for this, is that it bombed, which I think is very disappointing, because it was way better than some of these other movies that were successful, like fucking Bad Boys 3 or whatever the fuck. I don't know why people waste their time with shit like that. And so it's just, we might not get any more. that's why it's disappointing that it bombed, because there's definitely more potential for more Mad Max movies. And the great irony is, I actually liked it better than Fury Road. And I know I'm a weird oddball and everyone and their mother's going to disagree with me about that one, but I just did. In fact, I would recommend to anyone who hadn't seen either this movie or Fury Road to watch this one first and then watch Fury Road, because this is a prequel. And to me, this retroactively made Fury Road better, because part of what bothered me about Fury Road is I didn't give a shit about any of the characters. But this movie fleshes out that backstory, fleshes out the world, fleshes out the characters, and so I do care by the time you get to Fury Road. So I think they released these out of order, and this one should have been released first, and then Fury Road. And plus, Fury Road was too simplistic. It was, oh, let's drive to one place and let's turn around and drive back. Whereas Furiosa was way more complex. It was more world building, and it had a very sort of dark and fucked up, twisted feel to it. I think it's one of the most successful dystopian movies I've ever seen. I wasn't a big fan of the first three Mad Max movies, by the way. It's been like at least 20 years since I've seen them, but still, from memory, I didn't really care all that much for them. And Fury Road, I thought, was highly overrated. Because some people are calling it the greatest action movie of all time. I'm like, no, it's not. No, not really. I mean, it's got some good sequences in it, but to be the greatest action movie of all time for me has to have a great story and characters that I care about. And Fury Road was a bit light on that in that department, but Furiosa was actually stronger in that department. It actually did have characters I cared about, and goddamn, it could be very fucking dark at times, so it definitely left an impression on me. And I think overall it was just a more powerful film, and a very powerful film, and my favorite film of the year. So that is it. Those are ranking on the 15 movies that I saw. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to check out my channel, as I do many other videos, mostly on Star Trek, going back and covering Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, and other random stuff like that. And sometime next week I will be releasing my top 10 favorite TV shows of the year, so getting into the TV shows rather than the movies, so be sure to check that out as well. And be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.